50 years since a decorated war hero and American celebrity died in a plane crash just west of Roanoke.
Audie Murphy was a decorated war hero and Hollywood icon, but due to bad weather and pilot error, it crashed along Brush Mountain on the Roanoke-Craig line 50 years ago Friday.
After 54 years, Audie Murphy's tomb was finally opened. For decades, a single mysterious flower had appeared there every day, untouched and unexplained inside. Something stirred questions that no one could answer. Secrets seemed to hang in the air, silent but powerful. After all this time, the truth was finally coming to light. But what lay inside would shock everyone in ways no one could have imagined. It was the morning of May 28th, 1971. The sky over Roanoke, Virginia, was thick with fog, the kind that makes the world feel quiet and uncertain. Inside a small private plane sat one of America's greatest heroes, Audie Leon Murphy. At just 45 years old, he had already lived through more than most people could imagine. He had faced death on battlefields across Europe, starred in movies that celebrated his courage and inspired millions. Yet, on that misty morning, fate had something different in store. Murphy was traveling with a group of business associates. The plane lifted off, despite poor visibility warnings. Reports later described how the clouds closed in almost immediately, swallowing the aircraft in white mist. Somewhere over the Blue Ridge Mountains, the pilot lost his bearings. Minutes later, the small aircraft slammed into the side of Brush Mountain. Everyone on board was killed instantly. It was a violent end to a life built on bravery. When news of the crash broke, the nation fell silent. Flags were lowered and tributes poured in from soldiers, politicians, and fans. America had lost one of its most decorated war heroes. But as investigators examined the wreckage, strange details began to surface. Some flight parts were scattered miles away from the official crash site. Radio transmissions from the pilot cut off suddenly without any distress signal. A few locals who lived near the mountain claimed they heard an explosion before the crash. These small inconsistencies left a faint trace of doubt that refused to fade. Official reports concluded that fog and poor visibility caused the tragedy. The case was closed quickly, but whispers continued. Some believed it was just an accident. Others thought something more mysterious had happened. They wondered if Audie Murphy had been carrying secrets the world was never meant to know. After all, parts of his military file were still classified, even decades after the war. Those sealed pages only deepened the mystery surrounding his death. Murphy was buried with full honors at Arlington National Cemetery. His grave was placed among other legends, marked with a simple white headstone. On it were carved his name, rank, and the long list of medals that told the story of his courage. But for many, that grave was not just a place of rest. It was a silent reminder that even heroes can take secrets to the grave. As the years passed, the story of Audie Murphy's final flight became a mystery wrapped in honor and silence. But no one could have imagined that half a century later, the ground beneath his tomb would be disturbed once more. And what they would find inside would shock the entire world. For more than 5 decades, Audie Murphy's grave stood as one of the most visited spots in Arlington National Cemetery. People from every corner of America came to honor the boy from Texas who became a legend. His grave was simple, but the name carved into it carried enormous weight. Visitors would often stand in silence, some leaving medals or coins on the stone, others whispering prayers of gratitude. It was more than a resting place. It was a symbol of courage, sacrifice, and mystery. But over the years, strange stories began to surround Murphy's grave. Cemetery staff and visitors spoke of odd things happening around it. Coins and medals left by visitors would vanish overnight. Flowers would appear early in the morning when no one had been seen entering the grounds. Some even claimed to feel a strange pull in the air, as if the ground itself carried the restless spirit of a man who had seen too much to ever truly rest. For many, these were only coincidences, but others believed the site held something deeper. Rumors grew that personal items had been buried with him during the funeral. Fellow soldiers whispered that Murphy's closest comrades had placed letters, patches, and perhaps even military relics in the grave before it was sealed. Some believed these were tokens of friendship. Others said they were meant to hide secrets linked to missions that never appeared in official records. No one could prove it, but the curiosity around his final resting place never disappeared. In early 2025, Arlington officials quietly announced a restoration project to preserve historic sites, and Murphy's grave was listed for maintenance. To the public, it seemed routine, but behind the scenes, whispers began to spread. His tomb had never been opened since 1971, and some questioned why it needed restoration. Now workers arrived under tight security. Cameras were banned, and the public was not allowed near the area. Something about the secrecy felt unusual. The digging began at dawn. The soil around the grave was carefully removed, layer by layer. Supervisors watched closely, making sure every move was documented. The workers expected nothing more than soil and stone. But a few feet down, one of them struck something solid. The sound was faint, but sharp, cutting through the silence. They brushed away the dirt and uncovered what looked like a corroded metal edge. It was not part of the grave's foundation and did not match any known burial material. Supervisors were called over immediately. They examined the object closely. It was a sealed metal container, worn and rusted by time, yet still intact. Confusion spread among the team. The container was not listed in any official burial record. Whatever it was, someone had gone to great effort to bury it deep beneath the grave, far below where ordinary burial items would be placed. As word reached military officials overseeing the project, the atmosphere around the site changed completely. Guards were posted closer. Workers were told to step back. The container was carefully lifted from the ground and set aside for examination. Everyone nearby sensed the gravity of the moment. Something that had been hidden for over 50 years had just been found. Within hours, rumors began to circulate through Arlington and beyond. Some claimed the box contained personal letters. Others said it held secret war documents. The truth, however, was far stranger than anyone could have expected, because inside that old metal box lay something that would challenge everything people thought they knew about Audie Murphy. And as officials opened it for the first time since 1971, the discovery inside would make headlines around the world. When the rusted container was finally pried open, the small crowd of officials and workers fell silent. Inside were objects that had survived 5 decades underground, sealed away from light and time. Resting on top was a faded patch from Murphy's division, worn and frayed at the edges. Beneath it lay 2 medals that looked unfamiliar. They shimmered faintly under the dim light, their designs unlike anything in the US military's official records. But it was the final item in the box that made everyone stop breathing for a moment. A folded, yellowed sheet of paper with Audie Murphy's handwriting. The letter was fragile, written in Murphy's sharp, deliberate script. At first, it seemed like a farewell message, but as it was read more closely, its tone changed. Murphy had written about missions that were lost to the archive, covert operations that were never recorded or spoken of again. He hinted at orders carried out in silence, missions where failure meant vanishing completely. The words were filled with unease, almost fear. He wrote of truths buried for the sake of national security, and of men who were ordered to do things that would never be acknowledged. The most haunting part came toward the end of the letter. Murphy spoke not of war, but of the nation he had fought for. "A country does not fall when enemies break its walls," he wrote. "It falls when it forgets the blood and the scars of the men who built those walls." It was a message that felt strangely timeless, as if he had written it for a future generation who might one day need reminding. For those who had studied his life, the letter brought new meaning to his actions during World War II. Murphy had always been called brave, but his courage went beyond what history books described. One story from the war stood out as proof of the fire that burned inside him. It was January 26, 1945, near the village of Hautesville, France. Murphy's command post was collapsing under a fierce German assault. Tanks rolled forward while enemy infantry poured through the snow. Most soldiers would have retreated, but Murphy refused to abandon his position. He picked up his field telephone and continued to call in Allied artillery fire. Moments later, shells rained down across the open field, filling the air with smoke and dirt. The German advance slowed, but they kept coming. After emptying his rifle, Murphy climbed onto a burning tank destroyer. Over the radio, he heard the artillery commander ask how close the Germans were. "Just hold the phone and I'll let you talk to one of the bastards," he shouted back. Despite being surrounded, he seized the .50 caliber machine gun from the tank and opened fire. The flames roared beneath him as he mowed down waves of enemy troops. Smoke and heat filled the air, but Murphy's determination never wavered. He later wrote that his mind went numb, focused only on destroying the enemy. "For the first time in 3 days," he recalled, "my feet were warm." From the safety of the tree line, his men watched in disbelief. Private Anthony Abramsky later said he expected the tank to explode at any second. The fire, however, shielded Murphy from view, masking him from enemy sights. By the time the Germans retreated, the ground was littered with bodies. He had single-handedly stopped 250 enemy soldiers and 6 tanks. That day, Audie Murphy earned the Medal of Honor. But perhaps that battle had deeper layers, ones that history never fully recorded. Could it have been one of the lost missions he hinted at in his hidden letter? As the officials finished reading, one of them noticed something else inside the box, a small, tarnished symbol engraved on a separate piece of metal. It was not a US emblem or any known military insignia. Its shape and markings did not match anything in the archives. Everyone in the room exchanged uneasy looks. What was this symbol doing, buried with America's most decorated soldier? And why had it been hidden so carefully? To uncover how it all started, let's follow his journey. Before the mystery of the hidden letter, before Hollywood and fame, there was only a boy who wanted to serve his country. Audie Murphy was just 17 when he walked into a recruitment office, determined to enlist in the military. He was small, barely 5.5 feet tall, and weighed only around 110 pounds. Recruiters laughed when they saw him. The Marines turned him away. The paratroopers refused him too. But Murphy didn't give up. He went home, changed the date on his birth certificate, and tried again. This time, the US Army accepted him. He began his training quietly, blending in with the other young men who had also left behind their families and farms. Few could have guessed that this skinny boy from Texas would one day become America's most decorated soldier. His journey through World War II was marked by bravery, but also by heartbreak. Murphy saw more death and destruction than most men could endure. Yet through every battle, he showed an unmatched determination to protect his fellow soldiers. In 1943, Murphy's unit was sent to fight in North Africa, then Sicily, and later in Italy. Each campaign tested him further. He learned how to move through smoke and chaos, how to stay alive when bullets filled the air. By the time his division reached France, he had become a seasoned warrior. Still, it was his actions in January 1945, near the French village of Holtzwihr, that would define his legacy forever. As his fame grew after World War II, Murphy often seemed uncomfortable with the attention. When asked about his bravery, he simply said, "Bravery is just determination to do a job that you know has to be done." Behind his quiet tone was a man who had seen too much suffering to take pride in it. He carried memories that would never fade, the faces of fallen friends, the sounds of explosions, and the endless nights of fear. His medals told a story of victory, but his eyes carried the weight of war. When Murphy returned home, America welcomed him as a hero. But he didn't feel like one. The war had changed him, and no celebration could bring back the part of him that was lost on those battlefields. Still, Hollywood came calling, eager to turn his story into something larger than life. Audie Murphy agreed, not for fame, but perhaps to tell the truth in his own way. He became an actor, appearing in over 40 films, often portraying soldiers and cowboys. His most famous role came when he played himself in To Hell and Back, the film based on his autobiography. It was a rare and emotional moment when the real hero stepped into the role of his younger self, reliving the battles that had both made and haunted him. The movie broke box office records and solidified his place in American history. But even as his star rose in Hollywood, the man inside remained troubled. His war was not over. Nightmares, anxiety, and guilt followed him everywhere. The applause of the crowd could not silence the memories that echoed in his mind. And soon, those hidden scars would begin to take their toll, revealing a side of Audie Murphy that few ever saw, and one that would lead to new questions about what kind of battles he was still fighting long after the war was done. Over the years, he appeared in more than 40 films, most of them westerns and war dramas. His most famous role came in To Hell and Back, where he played himself. In front of the camera, he relived the same horrors that had once surrounded him in real life. The movie broke records, but behind the fame, Murphy was slowly breaking too. He suffered from insomnia and could not sleep without the lights on. Loud noises made him jump. Crowded rooms made him nervous. He began sleeping with a pistol under his pillow. Today, doctors would call it post-traumatic stress disorder, but in the 1950s, it was barely understood. Back then, people called it battle fatigue. Murphy called it his private war. Sometimes the memories came rushing back in the middle of the night, the faces of his fallen men, the sound of bullets ripping through the air, the screams that never faded. Despite the torment, Murphy refused to hide from the world. He spoke openly about what he was going through, urging the government to support returning veterans. He said that bravery did not end when soldiers came home, that the hardest part was learning to live again after seeing so much death. It was rare for someone as famous as him to speak about mental health, especially at a time when many soldiers suffered in silence. His honesty made him not just a war hero, but a voice for those who could not speak for themselves. Still, the pressure of fame and trauma took its toll. Murphy began losing money in bad business deals. He grew suspicious of people around him and often isolated himself. His marriages struggled under the weight of his moods and his drinking. Friends noticed that he was either restless or quiet for long periods, as if he was lost in a place only he could see. He spent hours alone, pacing, smoking, and staring into the distance. When asked why, he once said, "You can't kill all the bad dreams." Murphy's pain never stopped him from caring about others. He donated his time and money to help veterans who were struggling to adjust to civilian life. He believed they deserved better than the world had given them. Even as his own mind carried the scars of war, he fought for those who shared the same wounds. In many ways, he became a soldier again, not on the battlefield, but in the fight for recognition and understanding. But something else lingered behind his compassion. There were times when he spoke vaguely about things that were better left unsaid. Whispers about operations that never appeared in military archives, missions that didn't exist. Friends dismissed them as memories distorted by trauma. Others weren't so sure. There was a quiet tension around him, as if he knew things that others wanted forgotten. And as he grew older, that shadow from his past seemed to grow darker. His mind became haunted by ghosts, his life slowly spiraling out of control, and even his death was shrouded in secrets. Audie Murphy was a soldier, a hero, and a man who faced horrors most could never imagine. On the battlefield, he became a legend. But even as an actor, he could not escape the shadows of war. Murphy's death in a 1971 plane crash shocked the world. Official reports called it an accident, but there are details that do not add up. Local records show missing pieces of wreckage, and some reports of the flight's final moments conflict with one another. These small inconsistencies have fueled rumors for decades. Some believe that what happened that day might have been more than a tragic accident. Today, Audie Murphy's legacy is celebrated in many ways. Hospitals and museums bear his name. The Sergeant Audie Murphy Club honors soldiers who demonstrate leadership and courage. His story continues to inspire people around the world. Yet, the most intriguing part of his life may not be the medals or the movies. It may be the secret he carried to his grave. What was he trying to warn us about? Was his death meant to silence him? After decades of silence, his message seems to be breaking through. The letter, the symbols, and the odd medals hint at truths that have been hidden from history. If Murphy's final warning was meant for our time, then what was he really trying to tell us? After all these years, it seems the secrets he left behind are finally being heard, and what they reveal could change everything we thought we knew about the man and the world he tried to protect.